Hello, everyone. Welcome to SoundOff Summit, Digital Strategies presented by Music Calgary. Thanks for joining us today here. My name is Audrey. I'm a local musician here in Calgary. I've been hosting the Q&As every Saturday for the past couple weeks. Excited to do so. Before we begin, it's important to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region. And for future events this week and upcoming weeks, make sure to follow Music Calgary on social media and sign up as a member on the website to get more programming updates. I am joined here today for a Q&A with Rena Kozak and Tao-Ming Lau for a discussion on live production. It's going to be really good. Both of them have also done a couple of other events. Earlier this week, Rena did a great video on how to kind of maximize your sound quality for live streams from home recording. And Tao is involved in a digital tour life kind of panel discussion with a couple of other guests. So make sure you go on the website there, or the link will be posted in the chat for those videos. Thanks so much for joining me today. Maybe if you both want to kind of introduce yourselves and give a brief introduction of what you do, and then we can dive into some questions here.
Sure, I can jump in. I am Rena Kozak. I am currently located in Montreal, Quebec. I am originally from Calgary. I have been living in Montreal for a couple of years now, but spent a few years homeless on the road touring. So I gave up my apartment in Calgary and just toured for a living and stayed wherever the last tour ended, touring as a sound engineer, doing front of house or monitors or tour management and production coordination for quite a few different acts over the years. Of course, COVID ended my career. And since then, I have been just in Montreal working on developing my recording studio and developing a series of live stream events from my recording studio as a way to keep live music alive during the time that it can't be presented in person. So that's my story.
Thank you. I'll follow with that. Hi, everyone. I'm Tao-Ming Lau, Tao for short. I'm the founder and music booking agent at Blue Crane Agency. I started this a couple years ago after working in sort of mainstream corporate labels in Canada, 604 Records in Vancouver, Universal Music Canada in Toronto, Billions Agency, a Chicago-based touring agency. We had booked acts like Shad, Bashta Bulat, Wolf Parade, yeah, a whole array of amazing artists. And then I struck out on my own as a booking agent. And currently on Blue Crane's roster, we have folks like Zaki Ibrahim. It was founded with DJ Indian from Tribe Called Red. Narcy, Kelly Techness, Lisa, Lucala in Toronto. We have a whole host of awesome DJs on our roster as well. Bambi, Chippy Nonstop, a whole host of folks. And I'm speaking to you today from Seattle, but I'm based in Toronto primarily, and was born and raised actually in Vancouver out west. So I know the country really well and have been able to speak at conferences and traveled a whole bunch, which helps, you know, getting to know your venues and your promoters across coast to coast to coast. I'm also a board director at Polaris Music Prize and Canadian Live Music Association. Yeah, I've worked in labels management, publishing, sync. Live is my baby, and I'm most in love with producing shows and booking artists and representing them on the road. So I'm happy to be here.
Great, thank you all both so much. And I just want to throw it out to the floor as well here for anyone watching. If they do have any questions to ask either or both of our guests today, you can do so in the Q&A function or in the chat box here. I'll be monitoring both of those. But in the meantime, I do have a couple questions kind of more broader for the two of you, and some more focused questions as well. So first off, I want to kind of focus on the live stuff a little bit. I know it's not really happening as much now in person, but I still want to kind of focus on the positive and hopefully like in the future as well here. So for both of you, what role does the choice of a venue play in the multifaceted success of a show?
I'll let Tao go first because the venue isn't usually my choice.
But I guess you can add on after about like how you work with that venue and limitations, obviously, capacity to work your art and do your stuff in it. But yeah, I guess I'll just start off from like an agent perspective when we're routing tours. Like basically, you know, if we're working with an artist on an album cycle or an EP release cycle, and they say, hey, we want to do say 10 or 15 dates from from Newfoundland to say Manitoba or to Saskatchewan and come back. Basically, you know, we would plot venues in our routing chart. You know, I generally would pull holds and availabilities in 2 or 3 venues per city. And in terms of choosing that venue, because it is all subject to availability as well, I think it's a huge, I would say it's like 50-50, 50% the venue in terms of getting started on how to decide how to craft the show. You know, capacity is also a large determinant as well. Probably the single other largest determining factor in deciding what venue you go with. Obviously, if an act you know, is a local emergent act and they want to do 200 tickets at the Drake Underground in Toronto, that's where they would start. We would try to sell the 200 tickets in that particular venue and then move up from there and say we look at a 400 cap venue, 450, 500 cap venue. You'd have a host of choices there. So capacity is first, but second is ambience, environment, mood, genre. There's certain bookers at certain venues that just get certain genres over other genres. There's certain venues that, you know, get certain audiences over other audiences. So it's a team effort in crafting why we want to do a show in a certain venue, neighborhood, sound and lights, production quality, all that stuff. But that's kind of starting to scratch when we kind of start imagining stitching together a tour.
Yeah, thank you. And then those choices dramatically impact my job because my job is to then integrate the show, whether I'm doing sound or tour management, especially. My job is to integrate that act's performance into the space that has been chosen. And it's imperative that the booking agent and the venue understand what the show is planning to be. Frequently, when I run into problems, it's because the communication hasn't been there between the act themselves and their management and the booking agent as to what they plan to stage for their tour. So the only time I've really run into trouble is when the tour gets booked and it gets booked in, say, 500 capacity rooms with a certain production level of stage size and sound and lighting equipment in-house. It gets booked there, but then the band has this great idea to have visuals and they need a projection and screen in every venue, but that wasn't communicated when the tour was booked. They make this decision after the fact, and then it becomes the tour manager's job to figure out how to rent a projector at every location because that wasn't part of the original booking, but it does become part of the tour advance. And so, my job is really putting together what needs to happen and making it happen in each space, whether it's the right space or not. We make it into the right space and make the show happen basically no matter what. Yeah.
Great, thanks for that. And I do have a couple, I guess, like specific questions for both of you that I'd like to dive in here as well. So for Rena, I've done a couple like sound engineering things here and there with CJSW and stuff. And I always find like one thing that I find difficult is how to balance my kind of vision of what it should sound like for like during sound check and what the band wants to sound like and that kind of thing. What do you think is the best way a sound tech can balance their own creative vision with like the artist care that's required from you and a band who has a very particular idea of what they should sound like themselves?
I guess what I've learned over the years is if you're working for the band and you're hired by the band, then your creative vision needs to be in line with theirs. I can't, I remember mixing a Maggie Rogers show and I was so excited by the delay and reverb and effects that I was putting on her. And I thought it sounded amazing. And I was so excited. And mid-song, I got a text from her manager that was like, you need to tone down the reverb. And I was like, oh, okay, well, it's not up to me. My creative vision is a little lower on the totem pole. I can try things. I'm going to get reprimanded if they're not right. I need to be on the same page before I even start, especially, at that sort of level. Although I think for the most part, especially in smaller clubs or for you while you're learning, a lot of the bands don't know how they want their sound to be live yet. And so it's a great place for you to experiment and go ahead and try things. And if they don't love it, you can reel it back, you can reel it in. but definitely I think experimentation is great when you can get away with it. But being on the same page, listening to the band, listening to their album, trying to make it sound as much like the album as possible, for me is what I think the job is, to give the audience that experience.
Great, thank you. And Tao, if you have anything to add, more than welcome to, but if not, I'd like to ask you a question as well here.
Yeah, feel free to go ahead. That was just interesting for me to hear Rena's perspective on all the ground level stuff, of just how much creativity, how much production level stuff goes on, at the show. And that was really interesting for me to hear. But yeah, I'm going to stop it there.
I do have a question for you in regards to booking tours in the States as a Canadian artist. I have heard it's a bit of a longer and more difficult process to book tours in the States as Canadians, with all of the different kind of things that you need in tow before you do so. So do you have any advice for independent artists who are looking to maybe eventually tour outside of the country one day?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that comes to my head is keep really important tallies of your hard ticket numbers that you do in every market. Canadian markets, our population size is the size of California. And I routed tours, just being trained and being trained by an American agency. I would route tours from Florida to California, all over, Winnipeg to Vancouver. So I've done the whole North America territory. And, one thing that really comes to mind is accounting stuff, is tax to the IRS that you may or may not owe, is, every show that you play in the States, they're supposed to withhold 15% of your net profits at the end of the night. So if you can keep really clear records of your settlement reports at the end of each night. And can folks hear me? I just want to make sure that my volume's coming through. Okay. That's big, because when you get home from the States, the last thing you want to do is go through receipts and all the things from, random city and, Louisiana or, in other states and things like that. So keeping clear tallies of what you made, hard ticket numbers for when you go back to the States the next time is really, really helpful in getting booked for more shows. If you supported a bigger headline artist in 6 cities along the West Coast, for example, try to get numbers of how the show did that evening, because you can tell when you go back to, say, Long Beach, California, that, you opened for X artist and, 400 tickets were sold, or it was like a full room or whatever. If you're doing your own headline tour, keep track of those hard ticket numbers as well, even if it's just 50 tickets in, say, Austin, or how many people came to your South by Southwest showcase. Immigration is obviously the big elephant in the room to chat about with US touring. Trump era wiped out a lot of Canadian artists touring in the States and being able to get visas, and then now the pandemic. So it's going to be a slow build back into re-entering the States, I believe. But the States right now is going hardcore. Like a whole bunch of American festivals got announced this week. So yeah, and me being in Seattle and I'm getting my dose 2 shot today, just access to vaccines are abundant, and people think it's going to be kind of like the Roaring 20s when everything gets back in order. So I guess we can look forward to that. But yeah, immigration and I would say settlement sheets are like 2 things that are the biggest challenges that you want help with, and you want to get visas early if you can start those. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks for those tips. I think that's very important to keep in mind moving forward here. So thank you for that. Rena, I have one more question for you as well here. I feel like many independent artists nowadays record their albums in a very controlled or remote setting using DAWs versus like a live recording setting. How has the increasingly digital and even more accessible recording landscape influenced or affected your experience as a live sound engineer or like throughout your career?
Ooh, that's interesting. Let's see how to, is it, so the question is, how has digital recording affected my experience, or like remote recording affected my experience? They've both.
I guess a little bit of both, yeah.
I mean, what we're seeing now this year is a lot of people sending files back and forth over the internet to get things done. We're not seeing as many people coming together in the studio space, which has made for some really interesting projects. I've worked on a few things where we have sent a sketch idea or the basic structure of a song to a drummer, and then the drums have come back, and then the rest of the material has been put on top of that drum part, as opposed to rehearsing with a drummer in the space, which you end up with a very different product than if you were a band rehearsing together. But you have this opportunity to have a high-end drummer play for a few $100s, as opposed to having to fly them into the space and whatever, and have them work and rent out the facility. A lot of really great musicians have this available now, where you can just go to their website and send them your files, and they will play a part on your song, and you'll pay them some money and get it back. And I think that mostly is just exciting to me. It's disappointing that we don't have the in-person rehearsal or camaraderie around it, but it's really exciting to have all of these collaborations and ideas coming together. It's definitely made the mixing process easier for me personally. I can't really speak for all engineers, but being hired to mix for a band and receiving the files over the internet, I can spend a couple of days mixing and preparing by myself in my studio, sort of on my own time. And then when I think it's close to ready for notes, send it to the artist and get their notes and touch it up, as opposed to having to spend a day in the studio with someone, with them like giving notes and maybe, some back and forth communication about it that isn't always clear in person when people are hearing something for the first time. I'm finding the distance is giving people more space to figure out what they think about it. They can take that mix and go listen to it in the car. They can listen to it in the shower. They can, spend a couple of days making their notes, as opposed to sitting in the room with me where it's costing them money and try to get all their notes done. And then they go home and they realize, oh, I should have said this, or I should have said that. I think it's making for better products for me. And I'm having a lot of fun working this way. I might continue to work this way, even when we go back. So we'll see.
I think that's a great point to also be able to give both you and the artist some time to really think about it without the pressure of that time constraint. When you're working in the room together. That's a really great point. So thank you for that as well. I do have a question here, a listener question about touring and booking agencies. I think, Tao, this is probably more in your wheelhouse if you are good to go here. So listeners just asking, at what level of touring experience does it make sense to contact a booking agency? Are there other arrangements booking agents use in order to book a less experienced act that they wouldn't usually take on?
Other arrangements, yeah, totally. And sorry for that blackout there. I just wanted to change my camera, so we'll
No problem.
okay, are there other arrangements booking use in higher rates than usual? Yeah, totally. So the answer to your last question is often for our, at least Blue Cranes, non-exclusive acts, which means we only take commission on gigs that we bring these artists. So they can have their sister book shows for them, their brother book shows for them, their lawyer book shows for them. And I can also book shows for them, but I only commission off, shows that I bring them. So, some agencies I think will have non-exclusive arrangements with some artists, and yeah, we do charge a bit more. The reason why we charge slightly more is just a lot of acts that I think are great, but we're not on this sort of full-time exclusive arrangement is they're not exactly ready to tour, like I think they sound fantastic, but they're still in the development stage. But I'd love to put them on stage either as a support for a headliner I know coming through, or pitch them to say a showcase, or say like a private cocktail event, or whatever it might be. A lot of these acts at this stage need a lot more handholding, and is a lot more work to often book them because I'm explaining to them often what advancing is. A lot of artists don't know how to advance a show or even know what tour advancing means. There's also just more investment in terms of, I've had to explain, 101 stuff, like what a rider is, what a press photo is. Sometimes they'll send me 10 photos. You only need one press photo for the road and for your tour. Generally, that's the same photo that I put in all my show confirmations. That's the press photo that we use on all the ticket links. What the promoter generally will print posters to fly around town. That's generally one press photo. So there's a minimum level of just like learning curve education of what happens when you contract a show. A lot of people also will come to me being like, I've gotten this inquiry, but can you help me book it? Because I don't have a contract on my own. But we have all those clauses. We understand sort of the legal language behind it, what goes in a contract. So often we'll work with artists on that level at a slightly higher booking fee. And then your first question is, what level of touring experience does it make sense to contact a booking agency? Honestly, whenever, with the collapse of major label systems, I think in the last 10 years, a lot of people have used agents more so as a huge piece in their development team of getting them on the road in front of an audience to try to break them. So like I'm doing a lot more management work as an agent than I've ever had to do, which is exciting too, because initially agents would only sign artists, like I think once they're selling 200, 300, 400 tickets, and you always go through the manager. Now it's like, if I saw someone on stage I liked, I can just DM them, because often they're unsigned. Like the whole sort of industry team structure, I think, is completely turned on its head. Now there's just way more indie outfits. There's way more people doing their own thing, running their own labels and things like that. So basically, you always, if you want to get signed to a booking agency, you always want to invite those folks out. You do want people to see you live and to see you perform and see what you can do, see how you engage with your audience. But honestly, whenever, it's a huge plus if you're already selling 200 tickets in your hometown. That's, to me, like kind of like the base level of like, you can get 200 people out to see you that are besides your cousins and your immediate family and your immediate circle. Like when people are going online to buy tickets, not from you and your community, but online through Eventbrite or online through other ticketing platforms, like you're building a fan base, and agents are interested in that. So yeah, and hometown ticket sales are the most important. When you're selling out your hometown, that, you can go from Calgary to Lethbridge to Edmonton and sell tickets there. And if you're selling out of your province as well, I mean, definitely feel free to reach out to an agent. And also the last thing is, like, if you're getting inquiries, in other cities and you're getting inquiries from promoters or event planners in the next province over, that's interesting to a booking agent, because that means we have the capacity to like bring you to all these exciting other markets that might be hard for you to get to on your own.
Thank you for that. It's always, yeah, funny to think, like, I'm based in Calgary and all the bands here do the Great Big Alberta tour, and then that's how you know you're doing well when you can sell out all three and kind of do it in a weekend. So that's a great answer. Thank you. And we do have some live questions here. Maybe we'll just jump to Rena first because it does have a little bit to do with your talk that you gave earlier this week about the best techniques for live sound for live streams. So this listener is just asking, what do you think the future of live production looks like, and if you've done any sound for live performance videos during COVID?
What does the future look like for live production? I feel like that's so unpredictable right now, but I also think it's going to be very similar to what it was before COVID. I think we're all looking forward to going back to seeing shows the way that we did before. I think there will still be, I think we will keep around the live stream format more so than we had it before. I think that people are also enjoying being able to watch things from other cities from their own home, the same way that people enjoyed watching Coachella online before. I think we'll see that more frequently with smaller tours. But I think we're all eager to get back into the venues, and I don't see that being permanently changed, the live performance itself. I have done live sound for live performance videos. You mean, I'm assuming you mean online live stream, if I've done any sound for that. Yeah, I've done quite a bit of that. A couple shows a month we run from my studio. We have a YouTube page called Studio St. Zoe, where my recording studio hosts a live stream show every month for a different local artist. And we just started doing that because there was nowhere else to perform. And I had a space and I had the equipment and I had nothing to do. So I took advantage of being on CERB to give people a free space to come and have a stream. So that is, yeah, that's my situation. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then as well here, the listener was also asking for Tao-Ming if you have booked any shows online for live streams, and what does that look like from a booking perspective? I know we were talking a little bit earlier, me and Liam from Music Calgary and Colleen, about like targeting specific like local areas during live streams, or if you try to keep it more like widely accessible, if you have been booking any live stream kind of things.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Yeah, that's like 80% of my business during the pandemic. So yeah. Yeah, let me just take a look at this question. Yeah, so the majority is online. I find the budgets are not great. You know, a lot of promoters are like, we got this huge grant from Heritage Canada. Should we park that money for 2022? Can we roll it over in some way when we return to live, or can we do some live stream shows in the meantime or this year? So, you know, I find the budgets aren't as great, but I recommend to still do them. You know, generally they're not geo targeted, like, you know, limited to a certain territory. So there are some promoters who have tried to put radius clauses in, you know, like if you do a live stream for the National Music Center or something, you can't say perform for any other live stream shows within a certain territory, a certain kilometer or time frame, say 30 days before the show or 30 days after. Often I'm not seeing that, but so you're free to do whatever you want. And I do highly recommend actually doing live stream shows if you can, even if it's just for $500, even if it's just for $250. Just, I think, to get in the groove, back in the groove of things, and also just to keep performing. You know, the future, I think, of shows is always going to have a taped or broadcasted or live element in some way. And like, I know for myself, it's just like, I mean, I'm not a performer, but I'm, you know, I'm generally very camera shy, and I think a lot of artists can be that way as well. But I think the way that the business is going, a lot of promoters are thinking of new equipment that they can install in their venues, new production gear that they can, you know, have different capabilities in the future to do with their artists, whether it's not just live shows, but interviews or you know, doing music videos in their venues. Like, I think people are really trying to think outside the box of what they can do with space, just because the whole concept of space has been, you know, re-engineered this year as we're all working from home and things like that. So I'd recommend doing them. You know, the budgets aren't as big, but as Rena said, like, you can do them out of your house, and it's just, you know, you don't have to leave your home, and it's good just for practice. And then, you know, now I'm getting a few, you know, offers here and there each week for in-person stuff for Canada this summer and beyond. So I think people are going to try that. The States is way ahead of Canada. I mean, there's just full on 1,000-person festivals that are announcing in the States, but they're just way ahead of their vaccine rollout and things like that. So I think live stream is here to stay, though. People are going to be using it in different interesting ways, though, going forward.
Great. Thank you, both of you, for that. And I guess kind of following up, sticking in the realm of live streams and live performances, we did have a couple other listeners who were curious. And Rena, I'd probably direct this person to look at your video here, but they were wondering if you know any platforms and specifically platforms that are helping people cast high quality streams from their home, or if you could provide like a Cole's Notes of some of the techniques to help cast high quality streams from the home, because I think that is one thing, especially for maybe local or smaller artists, are kind of hesitant to do live streams from their home when they don't really have the resources other than like an iPhone or something to do that, or are worried about like not having a wide enough audience to make a captivating video, or, you know, those kinds of elements. So if either of you want to speak about that, but maybe Rena, if you want to talk a little bit first about if you know of any platforms that are helping people do that.
Yeah. I mean, as far as platforms go, I've only personally worked with the main already common streaming platforms. YouTube is where we do most of our stuff, which we made the decision to do that through the studio because it seemed like the most obviously accessible to the largest audience. You know, my mom knows how to watch YouTube, and so does my 7-year-old niece, and everyone in between knows how to watch YouTube. So there was no learning curve of trying to get somebody to understand how to use, like, say, Crowdcast, which is also very easy to use. But there are a myriad of various platforms that you can use, and I encourage everyone to look at all of the options. I've tried out Twitch, and that's just an interesting community. You know, you have your Instagram community, you have your Facebook community if you want to do that. Definitely research all of them and see which one suits your audience the best and what kind of audience you want to reach, because, you know, the YouTube, even though it's most accessible to a broad range of people, might not represent what you're trying to do. So those are, you know, the platforms that offer streaming. There are also a lot of new things being developed. There was one that I heard called Lemonade Stand, I think was what it was called. And there are other similar promotional platforms where you can be collecting revenue. And this isn't something that I've looked into. We've done all of our streams for free, but there are some new developments in ways for artists to collect revenue for your shows. And so I highly encourage you to start looking at that. Just give it a Google. I say Google Lemonade Stand because I don't know off the top of my head, but just say like revenue generating streaming platform. And I'll look it up later too, and maybe send that link around if I could find it. But I did hear the creator of that speak on a panel recently, and it sounded like a really easy way to charge your patrons money to watch your live stream. And I think that people need to definitely be doing that as much as possible. Remind people that the thing you do, it shouldn't be done for free. You are providing a product, and it does cost you money to create it. What else was asked in that question? Oh, a Cole's Notes of how to put on a show. My biggest point of advice, like I said in my video, is to test and test again. So set a private link up, set up what you think you want for your stream, and do a little clip, and then watch it back, and then adjust accordingly. You will decide that you need to change the lighting. You will decide that you need to change the sound. You might decide you need to change your hair and makeup, or you know, whatever. I guarantee you will make some changes after your test. And so always do a test and then do another one and make sure that you're happy with it. And then on the flip side of that, though, I also encourage spontaneity. So if you are suddenly inspired to stream, go for it and just go live without testing if you're compelled to. I don't want to discourage anybody from doing it, because I think it's imperative that we keep performing any way we possibly can. So do it. Just go out and stream. Hopefully I've answered your question. If you have any other specifics, feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then kind of staying on that same vein, I guess for Tao here as well, we did have some listeners kind of wondering about reasonable price lines for live streaming your events when you're just like a single band or single performance kind of on the live stream bill, especially if you are, you know, a more local or smaller band that usually only gets a $5 or $10 show that usually has like a multi-band bill on it if you were performing live and that kind of thing. And also any kind of best practices for live streams to kind of maintain that level of audience engagement that you would get from a live show. And yeah, just kind of like the different techniques people have kind of used to create that performance and that keep that engagement high. I know I watched like I've seen a Angel Olsen live stream where she was literally like on her phone in between songs and like it was super casual. But then I've seen other people's, like Parquet Courts had a pre-recorded live stream that was just like, you know, an hour of nonstop music, and you know, kind of what's the best way to navigate your timeline in your live stream or your engagement level.
Yeah, I'll probably let Rena speak to the more like creative elements of producing it, but in terms of like, I think you asked about guarantee and draw and fee. That's really hard to answer, honestly. It depends on each band, you know, how much you want, how much you need during the pandemic to get through your week. It depends on if you have a hard ticket draw in that particular city or that market that the promoter's from. It depends on tickets, what you've done in the past. Yeah, like if you've only charged $5 or pay what you can and you don't have clear records on how much you can sell in a particular market, it's really hard to. Live stream shows are hard because you can't predict capacity or ticket sales like you could before, right, in brick and mortar venues. So, you know, I find a lot of live stream budgets now are kind of just like, we want to do something cool. We got grant money. We want to do something by June 2021. Let's just throw this and throw this on and program the acts that we want. You know, this is from like the promoter perspective, and create a bill that's cool. So like, I would just ask for as much as you can. You know, they can always say no, like within reason, obviously. Like if you haven't performed more than say 20 times in your life and you don't have a hard ticket draw, like it's going to be probably hard to be asking for more than $1,000. It's probably going to be hard to be asking for more than 1,500. But, you know, and anything that, yeah, it's a hard question to answer. So it really depends on your particular situation. But if you're a medium level established act and, you know, you can pull through, say, you know, more than 200 tickets in a particular market, ask for a couple grand, ask for a bit higher from a starting point of negotiation, and you'll probably meet somewhere in the middle.
And then as far as the creative aspects go of how to structure your show or what to do, I mean, your options are truly endless. You're only limited to what you can do with the technology that you have at your fingertips and the space that you're in. But even then, like, especially when we're talking about pre-recorded, you can really do anything. And video editors are so accessible and easy to use. Even I can use a video editor, which I've never worked with video in my life, and iMovie was really easy to navigate. And so, you know, you can just throw your phone up and get footage that way if you have no other equipment. Maybe you have access to a good camera, you know, like really, it's impossible for me to dictate or make suggestions because the options are so endless for what kind of show you can put on in this capacity. You're no longer limited to venue limitations, venue sizes. You don't have to be on a stage in front of your audience. You can put your camera anywhere you want and then place your audience anywhere you want. So, you know, all you need to do is think about what kind of music you make, what kind of impression you want to make, and what would you want to see if you went to see your show, you know, like imagining yourself from outside the box. And then just, I vote that everyone should just go bananas with their creativity and do the most outrageous things you can think of, because this is how new innovations are developed. You know, the limitation that we're under because of COVID is developing new innovations that nobody's thought of. And I feel like we're on the cusp of some sort of big industry discovery of, like, you know, the next big thing or a bunch of next things. So please just make stuff. Make stuff, make whatever, do it. Go out and stream.
I love that attitude. So we have about 15 minutes left. If any audience members have any burning questions, you can always put them in the chat or the Q&A box here. But otherwise, I will keep going. I do have kind of a broader question. Maybe it'll be a bit difficult to answer, but we'll see. I know, like in particular, Tao, with Blue Crane, you do have like an emphasis on safer spaces and, you know, creating like policy with the venue or handing out gender neutral washroom signs and kind of giving all that information and making sure that venues are incorporating safer spaces practices. And I'm sure, Rena, you have experience with that as well, having traveled to many different venues and working with different bands and audiences and things. I was wondering if either of you could speak on like how the safer spaces element has kind of changed with online platforms, since they are a little bit harder to moderate. And a little bit less, I guess, predictable or less easy to control, and how you can still foster a sense of safer space on an online platform.
That's a really good question. I actually don't know the answers to it, and I don't have much meat to offer in this respect, just because you know, although we're still booking shows, our volume has just decreased so much, right? You know, we're doing like 20% of the normal business that we usually do. And I'm not able to make all the shows and track everything that's going on like I can previously with my, you know, in-person shows. You know, it's something that I would love to develop out and have more like controls on how interactions happen online. And I also had my first baby a week before the March lockdown, so I took a big chunk of time off for mat leave. So I'm just coming out of that now, and yeah, that's like one area that I actually can't speak on. I don't know, Rena, if you have anything
I don't have any answers at this point, I think. But I do acknowledge that it is a concern, and it's a concern that I think we didn't expect, although maybe some people expected it because maybe more people have more experience with trolls on the internet than I do. But I had my first experience running a live stream for someone who was very concerned about trolls. For the last performance that we had for our Studio St. Zoe stream was someone who is quite popular on TikTok and deals with trolls over there. And she was concerned about them showing up in this live stream and disrupting things. And so we just made sure that our video tech was signed in as a moderator to kick anybody out and delete their comments as quickly as possible. And I think keeping that in mind, that could happen to you, and having somebody, if you're expecting a larger audience, people feel like this internet means that they can say and do anything because they don't exist, and the person in front of them doesn't really exist. They forget that we both do exist as humans and have to live our daily life after receiving whatever comment we get. And so you need to know that that's potentially going to happen. And ideally, if you're expecting a larger audience, have somebody who is on top of it so that you don't have to see that comment, and so that your audience doesn't see that comment. You might need multiple moderators. I watch the Kid Koala live stream every Monday night on Crowdcast, and I don't know if they have a moderator. All the comments are positive, but there's thousands of comments. They are coming in so fast that you can't keep up with them with, I love this, I know this song, this is great, oh, I'm crying, blah, blah, blah. And it's just constant comment, and moderating it would be a nightmare. But then at the same time, at that point, it almost doesn't matter because nobody's even seeing them. And if somebody says something dumb, maybe two people get into an argument, but it scrolls off the page so fast. So it's really hard to say how focused we need to be on it. I think if your audience is large enough and at the same time small enough that the comments could impact the show, then definitely have a few moderators on hand. And every platform offers moderation. And I don't really have any advice other than don't engage with them, just kick them out immediately. If they've said something clearly offensive, just kick them out and let it stop. But hopefully human beings will grow as social creatures and develop away from the need to behave poorly to one another. That's the who knows.
I appreciate both of your perspectives on that question. I know it is kind of like a big can of worms, and like even now it seems weird that like safer spaces policy and stuff is just becoming more normalized in like live venues even over just like 5 years. Like it's still a pretty new practice, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I just thought I'd get your perspectives. I think it's a good thing to keep in mind, Rena, what you're saying, like regular safer spaces policies, like no jerks policy will kick you out kind of thing if you're acting like a jerk would definitely like apply in the live stream setting as well. So I think, yeah, just keeping in mind that like all of those things still transfer over is good to remember here. I have a kind of broader question for both of you as well in terms about, I feel like some people don't really realize the creative side of kind of back end of the music industry, and that there's still a lot of creative forces driving booking and touring and engineering. And when you think of like creative music stuff, you mostly just think of the performers. So I was just wondering if both of you could speak on your own creative processes and how they've helped you build your careers, especially as entrepreneurs or as self-employed or contracted workers.
Yeah, I think for me, like to what I was saying before about how agencies and agents have had to take a larger role in A&R and management and getting an act not only on stage, but often being, as industry people, seeing an act that interests us and that we're curious by and helping them shape their team. So often, I'll be thinking like, what, this act would be like jive so well with this manager. And like, to me, that's creative, is like setting together a team of like, this is actually the vision that comes across in conference calls and on Zoom calls. And like, that's the dialogue. And that's like the gritty creative stuff that you want to talk about from the get-go. So I think like team building is really important. Yeah, you're only as good as your team. And I think that helping artists get their footing that way out the door and in building a vision together with other people is important. For me, like also falling in love with shows, like that's what I do as an agent. I fall in love with shows and I sell them for a living. So like I have to really, really love the creative aspects of what someone is trying to tell me on stage, what the storytelling on stage, the banter in between the songs, the lyrics. I think that when we sign new talent, it's like I can look in an act and they can have, say, like 4 million streams on Spotify for a particular track. But like, if I see them live and I don't fall in love with it, it's like, I can't sell that act. I can't sell that show. So there are a lot of creative aspects. And I think, when we view shows and we view, how this person is engaging with the public, like that to me is creative, right? Like just to see someone put their art out on stage and it's just such a vulnerable process. And when it can connect with the right audiences, there's nothing more beautiful than that. Yeah, I might come back to some more points, but that's what I have on my mind right now.
I really loved your point about team building being a creative act. Because not only does that shine light on the fact that things that you don't necessarily think of as creative actually are and benefit from creativity, but it also is such an important step in the process of putting together a live production, the building of the team. is so key in choosing the right people with the right ideas. You don't want to necessarily tell your team exactly what to do. You want to choose the people that are going to do the right things and do things that you didn't even think of that are going to take it to the next level. And you want to have people that you know that you trust in those roles, without having to dictate directly. And so that is such a creative process. And I love it when somebody in your position is creative with those choices. And on behalf of the artist doesn't know everybody in all of the roles. They don't know all the sound engineers or lighting engineers or managers or production coordinators or whatever. And so it's up to their management team or their booking agent to make those creative decisions, or be creative about what venue you put people in, or, but no, within limitation, you still have to make sure you're making the right decision, but being creative. And there is so much creativity in every aspect of this industry, because this is art. In the end, we're making art and we're selling art to people for them to experience. And every step of the way throughout history has always been creative, and the best things have been things that were done from a place of innovation, and idea having. And so think outside of the box at every step is the absolute way to do it. Yeah.
That sparked, I love what you said, and that sparked another reminder, I guess, to my roster, which I realize is just so multifaceted. Like when I book musicians, and all the musicians and DJs and artists that we have on our roster, it's like they're not just musicians. Like they have particular politics that they could speak about, that I've booked speaking engagements for them, for whether it's like on campuses or colleges, or 80% of our roster is from diaspora. So like they're from immigrant communities, they're from refugee status communities. Their parents are from often elsewhere in North America. Like we book a lot of Black, Brown artists, Asian artists. So I've been able to sort of anchor some ancillary income for these artists by, people seeing them on stage playing their music, listening to their lyrics, but also like, hey, I want to hear that kid speak about where they're also from, like for 20 minutes at my conference or at my school or whatever. I think that's creative. A lot of my artists are again, speakers, authors. They've written poetry. They are educators, they're activists. They're dancers, choreographers. Like Zaki Ibrahim, she makes all the wardrobe on stage for her band and for herself by hand. Her and her son kind of like work on textiles always before a big show together, which is awesome. That sort of stuff, like people consult me on, like we did a show with Narcy at Aga Khan Museum in North York and outside of Toronto, and like he's like, why don't we have the supporting act, like why don't we have my wife open it? Like she just published a book of poetry, and it's all about Arab pride, diaspora, immigrant identity. Why doesn't she open up the show and read some of her poetry? And that's what we did, and it just ended up being beautiful. And then she could, their kids were at the show and like stuff like that. It's like, I really try, I'm just talking a lot here because I'm excited thinking about examples and things that I worked on before mat leave. But, Blue Crane is, I think, the first agency to really try to use Instagram to help promoters market shows. Like I have a huge marketing mind and I love it. And, a lot of agencies, traditional ones and corporate ones, they're just like, oh, don't market the show. Like that's not our job. That's the promoter's job. We don't want to take the job away from them. But I'm just like, I get these ad mats, I get these flyers and posters. I'm just like, that's beautiful. Like I want to put that on Blue Crane's Insta. Like, so we actually take a huge role in the creative marketing. Often like promoters will ask me like, what should we do? How should we market this? I'm just like, like Zaki, we did, a co-pro with sort of like the African Immigrant Association in Hamilton when we did our show there with her. It was a live stream, and like thinking about partners and co-pros, co-promoters, and thinking about images and flyers and what artwork we're going to put out. So like that's important to me, is like the artistic elements of marketing a show. And often Blue Crane has sort of taken a much more aggressive approach in being creative with the promoter and thinking about ideas like, how do we sell tickets? How do we get this in audiences that would normally buy tickets for this artist and normally wouldn't? So yeah.
That's so great. I love that you are bridging the gap between agency and marketing, because the agency made all the decisions for where to book the show based on what the show is supposed to be and what they know about the artist. And so they have sort of a more intimate knowledge of what's there. And then so to make the connection better with the promoter as to how to market it, or to do some level of marketing yourself, I think that's absolutely fantastic I think it's necessary and maybe a place that things have been lacking. So I love that you're innovating there. You also talked about your innovations into sort of other aspects of culture through your artists. And I think that that's imperative too, as far as the direction that the world is going. Like throughout history, artists and musicians in particular have been the voice of whatever the culture is at the time. And they're not, they're representative of what's going on, but they're not just doing things because they're happening around them. They're doing things that they're passionate about because of lives that they've lived and experiences that they've had. And so to draw on that, intellectual side of where the artist is coming from, and have them publish a book, have them do poetry, hire an author that they relate to engage on their tour with them or whatever, I think that's the best thing we can possibly do now at this point in history where we have so much access to information at all times. I am totally thrilled to hear you talk about innovating in that way. So that's really great.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
I think it ties really nicely into kind of a reoccurring theme that I've noticed throughout the Q&As the past couple of weeks, that is kind of recognizing artists and musicians as a brand or as an identity too, and kind of like building up a whole collection in terms of all the layers of like booking, marketing, promoting, everything, visuals during the performance, and all of it just like really comes into this nice package of like what you want to convey ultimately at the end of the day, like through your performance and through your role as like a public figure, I guess. So those are both really good points, and it was a great discussion. Just going to wrap up here. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Rena or Tao, do you have any kind of parting words that you'd like to say before we continue our days?
I'll just say thank you. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you, Music Calgary, and everybody that arranged it. This has been great.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. This was awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining me. Have a good rest of your day, and Tao, good luck with your second vaccine. That's great. And hope you have a good recovery day. Alrighty. Thank you both. We'll see everyone again here next week for another Q&A with Music Calgary. Cool.
Bye.
Bye.